Good evening. Tonight I'm joined by my good friend Blue Spooky to bring you 4 true scary stories that take place during summer break. After watching the stories here, please head over to Blue Spooky's channel in the links provided. Enjoy. When I was 12 years old, there was this park in the neighborhood that I practically lived at during summertime. It was in a very big area, with all the standard playground equipment in it. Looking back on it, I often think it must have been a waste of money for whoever owned it though. It wasn't unusual at all to be at the playground and to be there all day by myself. There just weren't a lot of other kids living in that area. About halfway through one summer, I went to the playground in the early afternoon. It wasn't as empty as usual. There was an older kid there. My guess is that he must have been about 14 or 15. He was sitting on the edge of the merry-go-round, using his foot to slowly push it along. I didn't think too much about it, and just went over to the swing set and claimed a swing. I was pretty good at getting the swing going without having someone give me a push, and before I knew it, I was swinging really high. As I was swinging, I kept seeing the older kid over on the merry-go-round, still pushing himself in a circle with his foot. I began thinking that maybe I should go over to him and offer him a push. He looked so lonely. I really wasn't great at going up to people I didn't know though, so I tried to ignore that thought at first. But then I began thinking, how would I have felt in his shoes? And I would have felt bad. So, after giving myself a big boost on the swing, I jumped off and landed in the dirt. That was awesome. I made my way over to the guy on the merry-go-round. As I approached him, he didn't really seem to take notice of me. He just kept using one leg to propel the merry-go-round, slowly and mopishly. He was a bit bigger than I was. I remember he was dressed all in black, which seemed silly considering it was the middle of summer and hot as hell. As I got up to him, I asked him, "Hey, do you need a push?" Quickly and suddenly, he jumped off the merry-go-round, spun me around, and grabbed me by the neck. I was shocked, but the real fear only set in when I heard a clicking sound and saw him bring a pocket knife up to my neck. I immediately began bawling and begging him to let me go. Rather than do that, he kept the blade pressed up against my neck and started dragging me away from the merry-go-round. I was able to turn my head just a little bit and saw that he was trying to drag me over to the jungle gym. It had one of those slides on it that was a completely closed tube. When I saw it, and I saw that he was headed over towards it, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind. This guy was going to drag me into the slide and kill me. I hadn't really been struggling much because he had the knife up to my neck, but even at 12 years old, I was rational enough to know if he was going to kill me anyway, I might as well struggle. So I began flailing my arms and stomping my foot, and mostly I stopped crying and just started screaming for help at the top of my lungs. Most of it didn't seem to faze him at all. He just kept dragging me towards that slide. When he had me over to the slide though, I originally thought he was going to drag me into it. But I guess I was struggling too hard for him to do that. So instead, he took me and tried to shove me hard into the slide. My struggling then appeared to pay off because he not only let go of me, but he shoved me, and that shove caused him to lose his balance. I used every bit of strength that I had to push past him. As I took off, though, he slashed at me with a knife, opening my arm up pretty badly. So I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. Hell, I ran so fast that I felt like I was going to fall forward on my face. Although I knew that I shouldn't have, I did venture a check back over my shoulder to see if the guy was coming after me. Thankfully for me, he wasn't. I was running straight for a row of houses, and he probably figured that he would get caught. Still, I ran screaming and pounding on one of the doors until an alarmed housewife opened it, noticed the gash on my arm, heard me screaming that someone was trying to kill me, and she pulled me into the house and called the police. I had to go to the hospital and talk to the police. They found the kid pretty quickly though, and actually without my help. Apparently, after I got away, he found another kid about my age and attacked him. This time he was caught in the act by an adult who apprehended him while calling the police. I spent the rest of the summer and subsequent summers in the house with the air conditioning on. I never could bring myself to go back to that park.
When I was 16, I got a summer job working at a local swimming pool. Although I was technically a lifeguard, I also cleaned up and closed the pool at the end of the day, so I was almost always the last person to leave. I did like this arrangement at first because it was nice to have some time to myself. It began to get less fun when about a month into the job, this really big and really rude guy began hanging out at the pool. He was easily around 6'3" and had to be north of 250 pounds. He was pretty difficult to deal with. He did cannonballs in the pool, which was very clearly against the rules. He also swore very loudly, which was also against the rules since there were tons of young kids at the pool. But he also had a big and overbearing personality, and I didn't have a lot of experience standing up to guys like that, so I often just looked the other way. As you would probably guess, eventually something happened, and I had to stand up to the guy. There was a younger boy on the diving board. He was probably about 13 years old. He was obviously very nervous about taking the dive. The man was behind him, and was seeming to get very impatient. I guess at this point he finally got tired of waiting, because he climbed up the board and knocked the kid off and into the water. That was it. I had to confront the guy. When he got out of the water though, he saw me and tried to push past me. I tried to get his attention, but he ignored me and made his way back to the line for the diving board again. Before he got there though, I finally got his attention by telling him that I wasn't going to allow him to go back up to the board. This pissed him off, and he actually turned around and pushed me down, saying, "I'll do whatever the fuck I want." The other lifeguards were watching what was happening, and they came over. Although the guy just tried to ignore them too, he was told that we had security cameras set up in the pool, and that he had assaulted me. If he didn't leave immediately, they were going to call the police and press charges. I could tell that the guy was really angry, and wanted to resist, but after faking like he was going to jump at the other guards, he waved them off and left. Last time I saw him, he walked through the locker room, and I assumed out of the pool. I definitely didn't forget about the encounter as the day went on. This had happened pretty early on though, so my nerves did finally calm down long before we closed up. I wasn't a small guy by any means, but that guy could have messed me up pretty easily if he had wanted to. We always closed about an hour before dark, and when we finally got everyone out of the pool and out of the buildings, the other lifeguards all left me to lock up. I locked the door, and then I went and cleaned up the locker rooms. I did the men's first, and by the time I was done, the sun was beginning to set. I then went into the women's locker room to clean up. I had calmed down considerably, but for some reason, I felt on edge going into the women's room. I guess being a guy, I had always felt that way, but I was still sort of on edge from that guy, I guess. I didn't feel wonderful being alone, even though he had been gone for nearly 6 hours at that point. As I was cleaning the sinks, I heard a sound coming from the stalls. Turning around, I nearly choked as I saw 2 sets of obviously male feet behind one of the stall doors. As the stall door opened, I was pretty damn sure I knew who it was. I didn't know how he got in, or how he got into the women's locker room, but I knew it was that guy from earlier, and I knew I had to get out of there as quickly as possible. I ran out of the locker room and went back to the pool. For a big guy, the man was definitely fast. He made it out really quick and yelled some threatening and angry things at me. Honestly, I was too scared to really hear any of it. I realized how foolish it was to go out to the pool area, because there was no way I could get out of the pool without getting by him and going through the lockers. I tried figuring out what I should do, because it was clear that he was intent on hurting me, and likely badly. Finally, I figured that because I was a good swimmer, I would try to jump in and swim away from him. There was no way a guy in that poor of a shape he was in could catch me. Unfortunately, he did catch me before I could jump into the pool. He grabbed me by the neck, and damn was he strong. I struggled as I heard him tell me he was going to drown me in the pool. I tried to remind him about the security cameras, but his grip on my throat was too tight for me to speak. I was scared to death, but as he tried dragging me towards the pool to throw me in and push me under, I caught a break. I hadn't cleaned up the pool yet, so the floor was wet and he had put his shoes back on. Combine this with my struggles and the lack of traction, and the guy slipped, releasing me in the process. He fell down hard, smacking his head on the concrete. Relatively unscathed, I was able to get away into the locker room and then into the office, where I locked the door and called the police. The man was arrested and charged with assault. Personally, I think he should have been charged with attempted murder, but there wasn't really enough evidence that he really intended to kill me. My brother Steve and I used to really look forward to our summer vacations when we were in school. We had other brothers and sisters, but we were in the middle and only about a year apart, so we got along great. During the summer, we'd spend a whole lot of time together fishing and swimming in the creek. We also sometimes caught salamanders and lightning bugs, little things like that. The two of us did so much pointless stuff during the summer that we often lost track of time. The days sort of ran together. This particular summer was when we were 13 and 12 respectively. Steve and I got a bit hooked on watching pro wrestling for a while. We downloaded tons and tons of older shows, and we just spent the entire time cheering on some guys and booing others. We even wrestled a bit, and ended up coming close to hurting each other a few times. We actually spent so much time inside, in the dark, watching wrestling for weeks, that our parents finally took notice. They told us that it was summertime, and we really needed to get out, get some sun, and get some exercise. We weren't really enthusiastic about it, however. When you get obsessed with something new and you binge on it, it can really suck to have to do something else. But we decided we hadn't been out fishing since summer began, so we decided to get our poles and head out to our creek. We used to fish far out from our house, and we had never encountered another person at our spot. However, on this hot day, when we got there, we saw someone at our place at the creek. We were a bit disappointed, but just figured that maybe since we hadn't been there for a while, someone else had claimed our spot. Steve waved to the guy and called out, asking if he minded if we shared the fishing hole. The guy didn't answer or acknowledge us at all. He just sat there against the tree, a fishing pole in his hand. Our fishing hole was large enough that we could just sit on the other side without worrying about our lines coming anywhere near his, and he didn't exactly tell us that he didn't want us there. So Steve and I decided to go ahead and set up on the other side of the creek and fish. It didn't take long before we cast our lines and were fishing, but we weren't comfortable. It seemed like that guy was looking at us, watching us from down the creek. He never acknowledged us at all, but he was still watching. He simply sat there, his hat down on his face, inspecting everything that we were doing. It made Steve and I both feel very awkward. We didn't feel comfortable talking very loudly to each other as long as that man was watching. If he was watching, that meant he was listening too, and we just weren't comfortable with that. so we began talking in hushed tones. That was awkward too, though. We thought that if he noticed we were talking so that he couldn't hear, he might think that we were talking about him. This went on for quite some time, and Steve and my concern grew. We began to wonder if something might be wrong with the man. He wouldn't respond to us, or acknowledge either of us. He never once took his pole out of the water, and we began to wonder if he might be asleep, or even possibly dead. Steve decided that he needed to check and see if the guy was alright. I was against it, because even if the guy was dead, I really didn't want to know. But Steve felt that if he was hurt or dead, it was up to us to help and find out. Well, I didn't really want anything to do with it, so Steve was the one who approached him. He did it really slowly, almost as if he was a bit scared. I guess the idea of seeing a dead man's body really freaked him out. Steve leaned over to pull the guy's hat up, but when he did, the man reached up and grabbed Steve by the neck. He pulled out a pocket knife out of his pocket. I reacted and ran over to my brother, who, although startled, had his wits about him. He struggled against the guy and I was able to get over to him. We were able to knock the pocket knife out of his hand together before he switched it open. I guess I should have picked it up and used it on the guy, but that honestly didn't occur to me in the moment. The two of us just kept hitting and kicking the man until he couldn't hold on to Steve anymore. When he let go of my brother, we ran away as quickly as possible. We just left our fishing stuff behind and we ran home. This experience was pretty overwhelming. We had sat there for over 2 hours fishing, and this guy never moved one time. He lured us in by pretending to be sick or dead or something. I don't know. But it takes a pretty sick person to do that.
Easily the worst thing about growing up when I did was the lack of air conditioning in my home. It used to get so hot in the house that I could barely breathe. You'd think I would have jumped at every chance to go visit relatives in cooler areas when my parents went away, but I was too lazy. So this particular summer, when I was 16 years old, I remained home while my family went to visit my grandmother for a whole week. My folks had been gone for about 3 days, and I was enjoying just being lazy around the house. Being home alone was always a treat for me, and I rarely got scared by anything. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, but I couldn't bring myself to go to sleep. It was too hot, and even with the windows open and the fan on me, I was sweating badly. I didn't think laying on the bed would result in anything but me tossing and turning all night. So I stayed up watching bad college movies. I don't recall exactly how late it was, but over the noise of the fan, I could have sworn that I heard something outside the window. I dismissed it at first. It was hot. I was miserable, and I had the fan running. It was pretty likely that I had imagined the noise. That was until a little while later that I heard it again. It sounded like a rustling noise. It still could have been the wind. This time I got up and went over to the window. There were some bushes by the window, and they were moving around in the light breeze. There wasn't anything or anyone out there. I went back and sat down, and about 10 minutes passed again, before I once again heard the rustling noise. I think the heat was really getting to me because I actually began to get a little paranoid. I got up, checked out by the window again, and didn't see anything except for bushes. Still, I was a bit worked up by this point, so I decided I might feel better if I closed and locked the windows. I definitely psychologically felt better, but it didn't take long before the house turned into an oven. The fan wasn't doing me much good either. I was sweaty, and probably very fortunate that no one was around because I was probably stinky as well. The only good thing was that after about 30 minutes of sitting there with the windows closed, I did not hear the noise out by the window again. Finally, the heat being way too much for me, I decided it would be a good idea for me to take a cool shower. Even after getting out of the shower, if I didn't completely dry off, then the fan would be feeling a lot better. So I went and took a shower, and I can tell you that the water felt so good. I probably stayed in there for over half an hour just enjoying the feeling. What snapped me out of it was hearing a really loud knocking on my door. I was shocked and shut the shower off. The knocking came again, very loudly and very fast. I didn't have time to get dressed, so I threw a towel on over myself. As the pounding on the door kept coming, I called that I was getting out of the shower and for whomever it was to hold their horses. When I finally got to the door, I was surprised to see a police officer standing there. There were 2 police cars outside my door, and someone was in handcuffs. The police explained that they arrested a guy who had been hanging out around my house. Apparently my neighbor had gotten up in the middle of the night and seen a man in black trying to open my living room window. The police apprehended him as he was making a run for it. But you see, that's not the scariest part. 2 things happened afterwards that really terrified me. They found several knives that he apparently had tried to ditch as he was running away. And they linked him to a break-in and a homicide that had happened earlier in the summer. He confessed to it, sneaking into a home and killing a teenager who was home alone in the middle of the night. I think it's scarier contemplating what might have happened sometimes, more than what actually happened. In this case, what may have happened is much, much more frightening. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. Please mosey on over to Blue Spooky's channel and the links provided. If by some miracle you're not already subscribed to Blue Spooky, make sure to subscribe while you're there. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to hit the button next to the tabby to be informed of new content. Feel free to follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. I'd like to thank Blue Spooky for working with me on this collaboration. It's always my pleasure to work with such a talented narrator and a good friend. I'm recording this on August 7th, and I hope that it will go up on August 7th. It was exactly 1 year ago today that I uploaded my very first horror video, The Lower Room. At the time, I was using the microphone on a phone and a sound recorder app on my phone. It sounded like crap. For weeks, I barely got any views or any subscribers. And now, 1 year later, nearly 80 videos, and over 12,000 subscribers. Well, I'm in a much different place. I want to thank everyone who's watched, subscribed, left likes and comments, and shared my videos. You've helped me turn this little channel, that I originally thought would max out around 800 subscribers, into a fun and fulfilling experience that I couldn't imagine not doing. I've met a lot of friends this past year. I've heard some wonderful things said about my videos, and I've heard some negative things, but fortunately there haven't been many. Now, I know I haven't had a lot of activity lately, and that might lead people to believe that my interest in doing this is waning. I want to assure you that this is in no way the case. I took on a task in July that seemed very easy when I started it, but has since been pretty grueling. Writing 2-sentence horror stories. I've actually been so frustrated by my inability to write them that my work ethic seriously faltered last month. But that is all done, so I hope to get back to a normal schedule, and there will be 40 2-sentence horror stories, 20 told by me, and 20 told by Truth is Scarier Than Fiction. I hope to have that up tomorrow, or sometime early this week. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. I hope I'll be here to entertain you for years. But in order for me to do that, you have to do me one favor. Make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.